I've decided to speak about decoding the sensuality in music because I work in music information research, and part of the reason that we spend so much time thinking about music is because it moves people and it affects us emotionally, and it's part of the reason why we come and listen to music over and over again, the same piece of music being performed by different people, or maybe the same recording, which is the same person playing the same piece in a particular way. And part of the reason that I am one of the lucky people who's able to spend all my time thinking about music and how it affects us is because of the explosion in digital music information. And also, because of that, a rise in music information research, sometimes called music information retrieval. And just to give you a sense of the figures, the global, this is from the IFPI report from this year, the global recorded music revenue is on the order of 15.7 billion US dollars. And the share of digital revenues is 50% of that, and it's growing at a very fast pace. And there's numerous industries that make this possible on a very large scale, and I've just listed some of them there. None of them are funding me. So there's no reason why I'm putting up these companies rather than others, but these are just representative companies that work in music, digital music. And you can look at the numbers and see that there's huge numbers of people interacting with music through these digital interfaces. And for example, Shazam, there's been over 30 billion Shazams since they started, and it's growing by 20 million per day. So people are Shazamming every day. Spotify has over 140 million active users. Shazam has over 120 million. So we are talking about very huge numbers of people who need to be able to access, and therefore their digital music collections. And therefore, we also need to have computer systems that understand how people interact with their music, how human brains, human minds process music, and we need to also be able to appreciate how humans experience music, and in this case, how they engage with their music. Okay, so with that introduction, I'm going to move into today's topic, which is to talk about the experience of music. And we all know that music moves us, which is why we listen to music. They evoke strong emotions, such as goosebumps, that's frisson, laughter and awe. And part of the reason why music does this to us is because it evokes expectations. So we form expectations as we're listening to music, and when these expectations are fulfilled, we get a rush of adrenaline, or not adrenaline, endorphins, and we feel a sense of reward for having have that expectation fulfilled. When that expectation is violated, sometimes it's funny, and it causes laughter, and sometimes it's just strange and new and interesting. And finally, music causes tension, so that modulation of expectation, when there's expectation and that expectation is not fulfilled immediately, there is sort of a delayed resolution, and so we feel tension when we listen to music, and that tension modulates over time. And composers and performers make use of this property of music to create a musical experience that is moving. So we'll talk about that, and we talk about how this is done through sort of, through the use of prominence, making events more prominent than others, the use of contrast, so when things change, and the use of time and timing and tension. So we'll listen to a bit of music that's a bit different from what you've been listening to in the break. This is a Greek a Soulfly song, one of the most popular pieces written by Grieg. And I'm going to have to sort of stop out of this to start the recording. And for those of you who read music, you can follow along, and even if you don't, it's like a graph, so you're able to see when pitches go up and down. Is that started? Is the sound coming through? All right, you know what? I'll play it for you. Aha. All right, I'm reading that screen over there. Oh, where's my pedal? Someone took it. You know, everything was set up just fine before this session began, and we had to dismantle it, and so when we reconstituted it, some things didn't get put back. Ah, here it is. Okay. So, again, Grieg. Okay, so that is how it goes. Thank you. So if there's no sound from my computer, I would have shown you how a cellist would have played this, because a cellist actually has far more control over each note than I do. Once I play a note, that's it. I've done my deed and it can't be changed. But for a string player, they can actually vibrate and make a sound that actually has vibrato. And so this is an example with vibrato. So if you take, this is in a software called Ava that we've created last year in my lab. And Ava takes the sound signal and it uses pre-existing code that turns a sound signal and finds the fundamental frequency of the sound. And after that fundamental frequency has been found, it can then automatically extract the moments where there's vibrato using an FDM technique, filter diagonalization method, which again was borrowed from another field. And so here, every single vibrato, you can see the pitch is actually modulating very quickly, and there's a frequency to how that pitch is actually modulating. And with this kind of modulation, you actually will then get a very expressive tone in the way that the music is conveyed. So that's vibrato. Can you hear it? Okay. For those, did you notice that slide that Ian just did? Okay, so he did sort of, and this is a very different way of playing that same thing. And final slide. So the top one is how Ian did it, and the lower one is how Susie did it. So we can actually see exactly what they're doing in that particular note to make it very expressive at that moment in time. Okay. And we can actually quantify these things. It's one of those things that's highly quantifiable. You can get a slope, you can get the maximum pitch, the top pitch, the bottom pitch, and the rate at which it's descending. And so we have ways of actually describing exactly what is being done in performance. So maybe the audio will work now. Let's try that again. So it's not only in Western music that this is done. This is an example of Chinese music. Okay, so you can hear the vibrato. So again, if you put that through Ava, this is what you get. You get to see exactly where there's vibrato, and you can isolate the moments where there's vibrato and examine and analyze every single one of them. So if you're interested in doing that to voice or flute or any other string instrument, you can download the software and play around with it at this address. Okay, so next we look at contrast. That is another way in which we derive interest or generate interest in music. This is Think of Me. So let's see. Oh, yes. Okay, here we go. That phrase is repeated. It's a bit sadder next. And we're back to the happy moment. And the sun comes out. All right, that was good. Okay, you get the idea. So there are these different moments where change occurs, and we take note of these moments, and, well, that's the orange bit, the blue bit, the orange bit, and the bright yellow bit. Okay, and now we're going to take a look at how exactly those moments are created. So this is the, so part of the reason that this is evokes those kinds of feelings when we listen to it is that the composer here, Andrew Lloyd Webber, is playing around with tonality. So major and minor modes, and then where the bright yellow sun comes out, that's actually where he takes a shift and takes everything up half a step. And so that's a very, it's kind of a slightly kitschy way of doing it. You'll see this done quite a lot, and you can try it yourself. It's very easy to do. Take everything up a half step, and it just makes it brighter and seems like something really great has happened. This is a technique, you could say. And so we can try to track exactly what composers are doing when they play around with these kinds of tonality and tonal patterns. And so over here, this is a representation of tonality that takes the original, this is a well-known way of representing pitches that we hear on, that we see on a key, on a keyboard. So that's basically, I've just played what is on a horizontal line. And on the vertical line is, yeah. And so you can wrap it up, as you can see, that things repeat, and you can wrap it up to get a three-dimensional structure like this, a helical model. This is called a spiral array. This was what my PhD thesis was based on. And you can represent things inside that spiral array that represent tonal elements. And this is how the spiral array works. Calculates what's the closest chord and the closest key as the music is unfolding. So this is Bach's Prelude in C major, and I'm going to play just the first chord. Okay, so I've played three pitches, C, E, and G, and you see the silver blocks, C doesn't. You know, I'm pausing that here, you know, because I have a keyboard and I have the software. I will do that for you. Okay, all right, so that's a chord of C in the key of C, chord of D minor in the key of C, G chord in the key of C, C chord in the key of C, A minor chord in the key of C, D major, and so on, okay? So this is able to trace exactly what's being done. And so that was the prelude from the C major prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier by J.S. Bach. Now I'm going to do a parody of this by P.D.Q. Bach. And this is from the Short-Tempered Clavier. Yes, and so basically it has those chords again. F, that's not supposed to be there. So you can see when, thank you. You can see when P.D.Q. Bach is actually composing like J.S. Bach. He's doing things that are sort of in the same key and in the right moments. And when he does things that are unexpected, that sort of veer way out, it makes these big arcs outside of that close-knit circle, the trajectory. So we're able to see exactly when unexpected things happen. And you can also see things like, this is again from PDQ Bach, from the same short tempo clavier. This is based on Beethoven's Fifth. So we know how that motif goes. And later on, he's going to, when the motif comes back, he's going to play it wrong. And what he does is, it's supposed to go, right? He's going to go. All right, so, and when he does that, it's going to go shoot way out, way up there where it's not supposed to be. So I'm going to get into that, and you will see how that happens. So you see that yellow line goes all the way up because it's not in the right key. It's gone to the wrong region. And so we're able to track when things are unexpected. And when things are unexpected is really when the interesting parts of the music takes place. When people get goosebumps, that's because there's a change that's kind of, well, sometimes expected, but sometimes unexpected, but it's not normally there, and so it gives you pleasure when that happens. So changes are very important in music. So the PDQ Bach, I didn't come up with the idea of using PDQ Bach and funny music. Actually, I was inspired by a book that was written by David Huron, which is up here, called Sweet Anticipation. So he writes about how expectations are formed and how music gives us pleasure. This is the score of what the PDQ Bach looks like. So by having these surprising moments, we get humorous moments in music, and that creates laughter. So this was where the PDQ Bach was doing funny things in the prelude in C. This is another view of that prelude in C, where it veers down at the end, where it's doing something unexpected. This is that Beethoven Fifth parody. And this is where it goes, instead of going to E flat, it goes to E natural, which is not in the right key. And that's another example from PDQ Bach. Okay, so if you're interested in getting your own version of the software and playing around with it, you can download it. It's on the App Store. At the moment, it only works on a Mac desktop or laptop. So, so if you have one, do feel free to check it out. Okay, the theory behind it is, can be found in chapters in this book that came out in 2014 on the spiral array model and all the applications. Okay. So this is just to draw it back to the example at the beginning that I played for you. That is an example which is, normally if it's played by strings with all the shimmering sounds and with all of the vibratos, it's a very moving piece. It's one of the most moving pieces of music, like many pieces that Grieg has written. It has a very pretty melody, and lots of people listen to it. Because it has not just the melody, but lots of changes that gives these good feelings of expectations being violated or fulfilled. And the kinds of chords that it goes through are here. I've just sort of outlined them. This is E major, E minor, or E minor, and there's A minor, and G major again, C major, E minor, E, it could be major or minor here, major or minor, and E major. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to play you this video or to stop out of this to go into the Musart app. I could do that, but you know how Musart works now. and you know how it's going to move around in that space and show you and highlight the chords that are happening in the piece at those times. Okay, so when we think about, if we go back to the Think of Me example, this is where there are changes taking place. So you can imagine how in one region, in the orange bits, it's sort of staying in one region of the spiral array space, and in the blue bits, it's going to go to another region that's sort of the relative minor, and it's going to come back to the orange bit, and then everything's going to shift up. There's a huge change to the half step up where the sun comes up. So if you actually try to measure in the space how much distance is traversed whenever these movements occur, so how much distance is traversed when we go from one section or one segment of the piece to another, you can actually see the amount of change that occurs. And the greatest change occurs when the orange bit goes to the yellow bit, so where the sun comes out. And this is, you get to see this pattern no matter what size window you use. This is one with 24/8 notes window. This is 16, so the windows get smaller, but you still see that gigantic peak when that big change occurs. Okay, so time. Time is important, so we know there's these moments of contrast and change, but we're also interested in how we can highlight these changes using time. And so we take a look at, I'm going to play you a bit, and I'm going to stop, or rather pause, where maybe I shouldn't pause, and just a little bit too long, just to keep you on your toes. And you're going to see how the use of time actually creates these kinds of anticipations and moments of suspense. So this is an excerpt from a trio by Paul Schoenfield. This is the second movement of his trio, and it has a beginning bit for piano. Okay, I've waited too long. I've lost it. Okay, so these moments, I can hold it very long. I can hold it very long because you know something else is coming, and you want resolution to that something else. So let me do that again, and I'll actually resolve it. So much better, yeah? Okay, so because that expectation was set up and it had to resolve. And because that expectation was set up, you knew something was coming and you were waiting for it. And because you were waiting for it, I know I could take more time, right? So, and when I take more time, there is great uncertainty. Well, you know what's coming, so there's no uncertainty about that. But the uncertainty comes in when that's going to take place. So that's what I'm playing with when I take time. And we have the same thing here. There's a moment in the piece, the Greek piece. This is the middle of the piece, and I will stick the microphone here and have you hear it. This is sung by a soprano, and at the moment where she's taking more time than necessary, you will see that in the orange bit. Anyone try to beat to this? Yeah? Well, if you did try to beat to it, you'll see that the beats are not the same length. They actually vary quite a bit. And this is where we're going to talk about time. And when we talk about time, we're going to look at those lengths of the beats and how they get modulated, stretched, or compressed, so as to modulate your expectations. And we're going to talk first about tipping points. We all know about physical tipping points, right? This, when something's sort of at an edge and the center of gravity is at the point where it's balancing on, and if you just tip it a little bit, it's going to just topple over. So the same thing happens in music. Here's an example of tipping points. This is a quick example of Chrysler playing his own piece, and since I'm not a violinist, I'm not going to be able to play this for you, but I'll just play the recording. Okay, so this is how much he's changing the lengths of the beats. And this is basically not at all what is written. What is written would have been a flat line if it was played exactly as written, but instead it's played more like this. Yeah? So there's lots of tipping points. He's playing around with this sense of going up and down and sort of modulating your expectations, playing around with it. This is another example. It's going to end up looking kind of like this. And so I'm not going to play from that recording, but I will play from the analyzed data here. Okay, so she took a lot of time before that last bit comes back. Okay, so we can do that again for the bit that I had played you by Grieg. So what you need to do is you need to have software like Sonic Visualizer, which you can annotate beats on. And once you can annotate beats, you can extract the data and you can plot it and analyze it. So this is what it looks like, what she sang. This is Edith Oldrup, and this is in line, this is a visualization of what she sang with the data. Okay. So this is exactly what she is singing and how she's modulating the time. And when the time is modulated, what it may evoke in the listener are feelings of tension, because now we're playing around with expectation. And last year in a paper, we proposed a model for tonal tension. So as you can see, when things were unexpected in that spiral array space, when PDQ Bach was playing around with your expectations, things were going far, far away. And when things go far away, it's actually creating a big space. So if we look at the diameter of the points that are traced out inside the space, we have a sense of just how dissonant or unexpected the music is. So the cloud diameter is a measure of one aspect of tonal tension, which is that dissonance. We can also look at cloud momentum, how much is shifting around in that space, and that momentum within that space, if it's just too high, that can also cause feelings of tension. And tensile strain is when the key, the tonal center, the center of gravity is in a region, and you stray very far away from it. That also causes feelings of tension. So in here, we have the Tristan chord, which is supposed to be a very tense chord, and you can see the 3 measures on the score for this chord, which goes like this. Okay, so this is supposedly where the tension is highest. Yeah. And resolves. Yeah. So we can then go back and do the same things to where people chose to take time and see how that correlates with the different tension measures. Here, for the diameter, the tipping points are happening just before where the diameter comes to a low. And over here, if we look at the cloud momentum, the tipping points are where there's a lot of movement. And if we look at here, the tensile strain, the tipping points occur where, again, there's a lot of strain. It's veering quite far away from where the center is, and so a lot more time is taken for you to actually experience that. Okay, so now that we have a way of quantifying tension, an application of this is in music generation. So music generation has become very popular recently because Google has this Magenta project, and companies such as JukeDeck are interested in generating music that are copyright-free, that you can put on your home videos. There's also interest in music that's generated automatically that fit different scenarios in computer games, so that it actually molds itself according to how the game is being played. And so part of the problem of music that is generated by computers is that it often lacks structure. Not only does it lack structure, it doesn't know how to transition from one section to another. And so in an effort to try to generate music or find a way of creating music that has some form of structure, narrative structure, we use the tension model to constrain the movements within tonal space for music that is generated. We also use an existing program by David Meredith, Sciatek Compress and Cosciatek, to find repeated patterns inside an existing piece of music. So it uses an existing piece of music as a template and copies over all of its rhythms and all of its repeated patterns. And so here's an example of repeated patterns found in the PDQ Bach piece. And so if we start with the patterns that are found and following the rhythms of the PDQ Bach piece, you end up getting a piece that looks like this. If you just randomly populate it with notes that just fit the repeated patterns and the rhythmic structure. And it doesn't sound very good. Okay, not only does it sound not good, it's unplayable. Okay, so after you constrain it to fit the tension profile learned from the PDQ Bach piece, you very quickly get something that's more coherent. Yeah. And you iterate once more and you go, well, let's get a bit closer to that. And okay, so you do want to stop around there because if you keep going, you end up with the same piece again, and it's not very useful. So Right, because there's too many constraints, and if we try to minimize the distance to what you found from the original piece, you might end up with something too close to the original piece. So this was done to many other pieces. Amongst them, this is March in D by J.S. Bach. Okay, so that's the original piece, untouched. And now I'll play you what Morpheus, the program, generated. Okay. So if you're interested in seeing more of Morpheus pieces, you can go online. Morpheus has a website. And here's some examples of other music generation systems. And finally, just a recap, we've looked at how prominence is modulated in music performance, how composers create contrast, how performers use time to exaggerate these contrasts or shape your expectations. And finally, how tension can be used in music generation. And if you're interested in finding out more about these projects and others, feel free to browse some of our websites and blogs. Thank you.